Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too want to thank everyone for joining us today. I know this is painful and it's deeply personal. It's deeply personal to many of us. I have here pictures of one of my interpreters, Spartacus, who was beheaded by the Taliban, a young man of 19 years old who only wished to one day come to America, as he was literally saving my life. I have here a picture of Rahim, who we did manage to get out on the SIV program. I'm standing next to him building a well for his village. But you know what? What did the Taliban do when we successfully, since this was such an outstanding success, get these people out? They're hunting down his family. They've captured his cousin, tied him up behind a Taliban truck, drug him through the village, and killed him to say, don't you dare ever work for America or work with America or work with the West again. And they've also beaten his brothers nearly to death. So even when we're successful, they start targeting and going after the families. Mr. Hong, Mr. Mann, you had to basically become your own State Department. You had to charter international flights. You had to arrange country clearances. You had to deal with international borders because the State Department failed. Is that an accurate statement? Do you disagree with that statement?
I don't disagree with that, Congressman.
Congressman, the State Department found itself in a very difficult situation with very little guidance, as far as we can tell, no advanced planning for this exact scenario, and unclear lines of authority. And so while many individuals at the State Department tried their best to help us, they found themselves hamstrung by the bureaucracy.
No, thank you for that clarification, because this was a failure at leadership at the most senior levels of the State Department and the White House. Mr. Mann, do you have members of Task Force Pineapple veterans who have exhausted their personal savings trying to help these Afghans?
I do. There's a friend of mine, Duke, who's in the Moral Compass Federation with us, says that so many of our veterans have basically taken on an Uncle Sam-sized problem with their pension funds.
Do you know, do you know members that have exhausted their children's 529 plans?
Some of them are in this room right now.
Do you know members that survived multiple deployments, their marriages, but now they're heading to divorce?
Yes.
Do you know members that are thinking of or have committed suicide? You mentioned Brad. He was my friend too. He was my operations officer. He's now dead because of this moral injury. How many? Well, I don't even know if you can quantify it, but you mentioned an 81% increase. There's been a 40% increase just in the last anniversary in text to the suicide hotline. At the same time, is it fair to say these veterans feel betrayed by their own government?
I do.
Do you think that added to their moral injury to see the President of the United States calling this an outstanding success, I quote?
I believe even more hurtful is the non-mentioning of it in 2 State of the Union addresses.
Thank you, because that's what I was about to ask you. Do you think the fact that he didn't even say the word Afghanistan hurt them even more? Didn't even say the word.
I do.
Mr. Hong, actually, for everybody on the panel, is this war over? Does anybody think this war is over? Because we've had members of this committee, the House Foreign Relations Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, the United States government, United States House of Representatives, and the President of the United States, and the Secretary of Defense, and Secretary of State celebrate the fact that the war is over. Did the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS get the memo that we decided, that the President decided the war was over? Is this war over? Do we still have people trapped behind enemy lines, over 80,000? I know the answer is yes. In fact, today, this morning at 9:23 a.m., I received a desperate email from one of my interpreters who was formerly a school teacher, but decided to work for a better future for women and children in Afghanistan. He's now being hunted. He's been in hiding for 2 years. 9:23 a.m. this morning. Do you think he thinks this war is over? Are the Taliban systematically hunting these people down? Anybody disagree with that this is top-down, top-driven? I'll just end with this. Mr. Mann, you're absolutely right. What happens in Afghanistan does not and will not stay in Afghanistan. Members of this committee celebrated when President Obama pulled us out of Iraq in 2011 with no follow-on plan. ISIS caliphate comes roaring in 3 years later, and we now have more members there, more military members back dealing with that than when we left in 2011. They were wrong then, and they're wrong now. And Mr. Chairman, I'll just close with saying I have never been more proud of my fellow Americans and veterans as I am with this group, but I've also never been more disgusted with my own government. This was a callous, cold-hearted, incompetent episode on the part of this administration, and it is not worthy of the men and women that we all carry on these bracelets and their sacrifice. I yield.